For decades, Jeffrey Epstein operated in plain sight, not hidden in the shadows, not on the run, but openly among the wealthy, the powerful, and the protected. His private jets landed at major airports. His mansions sat in the most secure neighborhoods in the world. His guests included politicians, financiers, scientists, and royalty. And yet, despite repeated warnings, reports, and allegations, Epstein's operation continued largely uninterrupted for years. The question is no longer what he did. The question is how the systems designed to stop people like him failed so completely. One of the earliest and most critical failures happened at the local law enforcement level. As early as the late 1990s and early 2000s, police in Palm Beach, Florida, received multiple complaints about Epstein's behavior with underage girls. These were not vague rumors. The reports were detailed, consistent, and came from multiple victims who didn't even know each other. Yet investigations moved at a snail's pace. Evidence was mishandled. Warrants were delayed. And crucially, jurisdictional confusion allowed responsibility to shift between local police, state prosecutors, and federal authorities. This fragmentation created gaps that Epstein's legal team exploited with expert precision. Powerful defense attorneys negotiated aggressively, leveraging Epstein's wealth and connections. The result was the now infamous 2008 non-prosecution agreement. This deal shielded Epstein from federal charges and granted immunity to his unnamed potential co-conspirators. That agreement alone represents one of the most significant security and regulatory failures in modern criminal justice history. It effectively shut down broader investigations before they could even get started. Victims were not informed. Federal agencies were sidelined, and Epstein was allowed to continue operating, traveling, and socializing with minimal restrictions. But law enforcement failures were only part of the picture. Epstein's lifestyle itself exposed deep weaknesses in private security culture. His properties were guarded by staff whose loyalty was tied to their paychecks, not to accountability. Surveillance systems existed, but footage was rarely, if ever, reviewed by outsiders. House managers controlled all access, schedules, and interactions, creating a closed environment where abuse could be concealed behind the facade of routine operations. In other words, Epstein didn't evade security systems. He owned them. Air travel was another critical vulnerability. Epstein's frequent use of private jets allowed him to bypass many of the security checks, passenger records, and scrutiny that come with commercial flights. Flight manifests were often incomplete. Passenger identities were inconsistently recorded. International travel occurred with minimal oversight. This mobility allowed Epstein to move people, including young women, across state and national borders with alarming ease, a reality that later became central to the trafficking allegations against him. Financial oversight also failed spectacularly. Epstein's wealth flowed through complex networks of trusts, shell companies, and offshore accounts. Despite obvious red flags, unusual payments, non-traditional employment arrangements, and large, questionable transfers, financial institutions continued to do business with him. Some banks later paid massive fines for their compliance failures, acknowledging that warning signs were either missed or deliberately ignored. But during Epstein's years of operation, those same institutions provided him with legitimacy, stability, and access. The regulatory systems designed to flag suspicious activity simply didn't to act fast enough or forcefully enough to make a difference. Then there was the issue of reputation laundering. Epstein carefully cultivated an image as a philanthropist, an academic benefactor, and a financial genius. He donated to prestigious universities. He funded scientific research. He hosted exclusive conferences. He surrounded himself with respected figures from the worlds of science, business, and politics. This created a powerful psychological shield. When accusations surfaced, they clashed with the public image Epstein had so carefully constructed. Institutions hesitated. Individuals expressed doubt. Some victims were dismissed or discouraged from speaking out, not because evidence was lacking, but because the accused didn't fit the profile of a predator. This bias, the assumption that wealth and status imply credibility, proved to be devastatingly effective. Media failures played a role as well. Journalists investigated Epstein multiple times over the years, but stories were often delayed, softened, or killed outright. The threat of legal pressure, the fear of costly lawsuits, and general editorial caution slowed public exposure. In some cases, reporting didn't gain significant traction until years later, long after the worst of the damage had already been done. By the time Epstein was finally arrested again in 2019, the system was merely reacting, not preventing. And even then, security failed one last tragic time. Epstein died in federal custody under circumstances that sparked global outrage and deep institutional distrust. Regardless of the official conclusions, the fact remains that a high-profile detainee accused of some of the most serious crimes imaginable was able to die while under government supervision. For many, that moment symbolized the ultimate breakdown, not just of jail security, but of institutional trust itself. What makes this story so chilling is not just Epstein himself. It's the realization that his operation didn't rely on secrecy alone. It relied on complex, trusted systems, all failing simultaneously: law enforcement fragmentation, financial oversight gaps, private security loopholes, media hesitation, and our own cultural deference to power and wealth. No single failure explains how Epstein operated for so long, but together they form a terrifying blueprint of how predatory networks can survive not by hiding, but by embedding themselves inside the very systems that were supposed to protect us. Epstein exploited those weaknesses relentlessly. And the most uncomfortable truth may be this: unless those vulnerabilities are fundamentally addressed, he may not be the last. Thanks for watching.